In at number 10, Knuckles Chaotix. Starting off this list with something a bit more tame, Knuckles Chaotix is a bit subtle with its creepy vibes. By the end of the game, if you don't manage to collect all of the Chaos Rings, it's heavily implied that Knuckles and Sonic die. In addition to that, when the credits roll, you get a great visual of Robotnik floating in the sky as the city below him burns. Talk about sinister. Up next, number 9, Pikmin. It's hard to believe that Pikmin could be anything but a happy, feel-good game. You play as Captain Olimar, an alien who is stranded on a planet inhabited by creatures called Pikmin, who help you collect all of the parts you lost when your spaceship crashed. But if you fail to repair your ship, the true motivations of the Pikmin become clear. That they've been waiting for you to fail so that they could turn you into one of them. Except the Pikmin you turn into doesn't look so hot. In at number 8, Home. Home is described as a unique horror adventure set in a beautifully realized pixel world, which is pretty accurate. You follow a man who wakes up in a building with a bummed leg, and you journey your way back home to your house, all while in search of your missing wife. Oh, and you have amnesia, of course. All you have to navigate with is a flashlight, and all else is silent minus the sound design of the world around you. It's incredibly eerie, especially when playing in the dark with the sound up as the game suggests. What makes Home so creepy is that depending on how you navigate your way back to your house and what evidence you find along the way, the assumptions your character makes about what happened changes. Even then, it's still highly subjective and open-ended. Many players have speculated that you were responsible for the deaths of your wife, your co-worker, and the dead women out in the forest, while others think that you may have murdered your wife, but that the other events were just red herrings that you just happened to unearth along the way. And at number 7, The Suffering. In The Suffering, you play as a man named Torque, who was convicted for murdering his wife and kids, who also has amnesia. Throughout the game, you try to escape the prison you're in, since it's now overrun by homicidal monsters. Depending on how you play the game and if you throw all morals to the wind, you'll end up with the bad ending, where you remember and see how you murdered your family, and then you turn yourself into a monster and saunter back into the prison. Yay! Up next, number 6, Fatal Frame 2. The escape ending in Fatal Frame 2 has a good old creepy jump scare. Also known as the lingering scent ending, this one occurs when you choose to not go after your sister Mayu. As you are escaping the village, you hear a voice say, "Are you leaving me again?" Itsuku's voice then warns you not to turn around. But what do? You turn around. And guess what you see?
Mayu.
Sei's ghost coming right at you. You then wake up in a forest, in the same spot where you and Mayu sat at the beginning of the game, except this time, you're alone. And you can hear Mayu vowing to wait for you forever. Dark. And number 5, Condemned: Criminal Origins. Condemned is a first-person survival horror game set in a fictional American city, where you play as a crime scene investigator, who has been framed for murder by a serial killer. Meanwhile, you've got to fight off a bunch of psychotic citizens who have been driven to madness by some unknown extraneous force, created by a creature known as the Hate. By the end of the game, you're given an option to choose revenge or compassion, when you discover that the serial killer, who turned out to be your friend's nephew, is still alive in the trunk of your friend's car. If you choose to show him compassion, Leland, the serial killer, commits suicide. And in a cutscene that occurs later on, you go into the restroom of a diner, look into the mirror, and watch as your mouth transforms into one of the Hate's mutations. So I guess you're better off killing him. In at number 4, Outlast 2. In Outlast 2, you play as investigative journalist and cameraman Blake. You and your wife Lynn are headed into a remote county region in Arizona in search of answers about a mysterious murder of a young pregnant woman. But your helicopter crashes, and you end up in the thick of a town consumed by a religious cult in the midst of a conflict with another rival cult. Yeah, that's bad luck. When you wake up from the crash, you realize your wife has gone missing, that the apocalypse is on its way, and you keep having hallucinations about your childhood. A childhood that occurred in a super Catholic school in which one of your friends named Jessica was being molested by a priest, and then died because of said abuse. By the end of the game, you end up finding your wife, who somehow became 9 months pregnant within like a few days' time and is giving birth. She dies and the cult leader slits his own throat, and you discover that all of his followers have committed mass suicide in preparation for the apocalypse. And then you and your newborn are engulfed in light. You then wake up with Jessica, whose neck is fatally bruised, and she promises to never let you go as you begin to pray together. Yeah, so tad uncomfortable there, to say the least. In at number 3, Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill 2 has 6 endings in total, with 2 very absurd ones, but for the purpose of this list, we're gonna talk about the Rebirth ending. James kills Maria, and then he rows a boat with his wife's corpse to the Church of the Rebirth, with the intention of resurrecting Mary by confronting the old gods of Silent Hill. The ending can only be achieved on your second playthrough by obtaining the White Chrism in Blue Creek, the Obsidian Goblet at the Historical Society, the Book of Lost Memories at the Texan gas station, and the book Crimson Ceremony in the reading room of the Lakeview Hotel.
The old gods haven't left this place.
On the flip side of this, there is also a secret dog ending, so the grass is always greener on the other side, I guess.
お前の仕業だったのか
And number 2, Doki Doki Literature Club. Doki Doki Literature Club subverts the visual novel dating sim genre. What appears to be a typical dating sim soon becomes a psychological horror story when, spoilers, one of the girls in the high school literature club that you've joined turns out to be sentient and fully aware of the fact that she's trapped inside a game. She starts manipulating the events and behaviors of the other girls in the club as a means to pursue you, and ultimately pursue happiness, which leads to the suicides of 2 of the members. The game eventually leads you to delete her character file, and things get horrifically existential and dark. The game has various endings depending on what acts you progress to, and all of them are bleak. We recently did a full list on Doki Doki Literature Club, so if this number sparked your interest, I definitely suggest checking that out too. And finally, in at number 1, Limbo. Sometimes simplicity can achieve the most chilling of narratives. Limbo is exactly that. It's been hailed as an example of video games as an art form. Minimal, stark, and morbidly elegant, the game presents itself to you with barely any explanation, except this. Uncertain of his sister's fate, a boy enters Limbo. You play as a small boy in search of his sister, traveling through what appears to be purgatory. This vagueness has led to players speculating and theorizing about the proper interpretation of the game. At the end, after you finish the last puzzle, the boy is thrown through a pane of glass and back into the forest where his journey began. You walk a short distance until you encounter a girl, your sister, who stands up when you approach, but her back is still turned to you, and then all of a sudden the game ends. Then the credits roll and then we come back to see the same frame, except you and your sister are gone. Based off of this positioning and that this is the scene that we return to, take a look at the spots where both the characters stood. Many people assume that this is where the characters died. These spots are now preoccupied by flies. Some see this to mean that perhaps in life, both of the characters fell from the treehouse and died, and that the sister, who has no eyes, is not aware that she is dead. Regardless of how you interpret it, it's safe to say that, it's pretty morbid. And at number 10 is Slender the Arrival. Okay, so you've been tracking the Slender Man, trying to solve the mystery as to what happened to all these children that have gone missing. Why is everything deserted? Well, the big final climax of the game gives you the answers, but then it immediately backs you into a literal corner where the Slender Man shows up and then just kills you regardless. Considering the entire game was a constant sprint for survival, having the only option to be stand there and die was a little disheartening. And at number 9 is Dark Souls. Dark Souls is a game that doesn't actually have an ending, narratively speaking, that is. While some felt that it was a bit poetic that the game had no ending, others felt as if it made all of their choices in the game completely irrelevant, and that it should have somehow impacted the next run through of the game. Up next, number 8 is God of War 2. What's one way to ensure a sequel? Prolong Zeus's death by killing off one of the more interesting characters in the game, Athena. And then she tells Kratos that he's actually Zeus's son, which was convenient, and didn't want to be usurped by him. So enter the cliffhanger of Kratos and the Titans climbing Mount Olympus to take down the gods. While critics generally praised the game, a lot felt that the game didn't really evolve the series that much, and that killing Athena felt like a way just to sell more copies of the next game. What do you guys think? And number 7 is Fable 2. So Fable 2 has 3 endings, and they all have some component of suckage. Choose between wealth, love, or sacrifice. If you go with wealth, everyone dies and they stay dead, but at least you'll be rich. Love? Well, your loved ones return, but everyone who died in the building of the spire stays dead. And that noble option, sacrificing yourself? Great, all those people who were killed during the building of the spire returned, but your dog dies, and your family stays dead. Not really a win-win situation over here. And at number 6 is Heavy Rain. There's a few different endings you can achieve in Heavy Rain, but the worst one by far is where Madison and Norman are dead, and Ethan has been framed as the origami killer, and then kills himself. Of course, if you manage to keep the characters alive based on your decisions, you'll have a much happier ending, with Ethan and Madison and Sean all being one big happy family. But if not, you get to hang yourself. And at number 5 is Batman Arkham Asylum. Here we have an example of an amazing game, weird ending, or as I like to call it, jacked up Joker. Luckily, Arkham City does a great job of giving us an ending that we deserve with the Joker, but Asylum's ending in the steroid-ridden Joker felt like a cop-out and out of character. So, long story short, Batman goes to face off against the Joker, who injects himself with Titan and becomes this.
But you still spoil my fun, and for that, I'll paint Arkham with your blood.
Batman eventually manages to defeat him, all of the Titan wears off, and the police reclaim the asylum. But you still gotta fight a big jacked up Joker who has a mohawk and feels weirdly out of character. Maybe just skip ahead to Arkham City. Up next, number 4 is Ghostbusters, the 1984 game. Made by Activision, this NES Ghostbusters game gives you this message when you finish. Congratulations, you have completed a great game. and prove the justice of our culture. Now go and rest our heroes. I think that speaks for itself. Up next, number 3 is Outlast. Okay, so you make it through this damn psychiatric hospital, and for what? Walrider turns out to be a child who's pretty much dead. You finally put a stop to all of that craziness with him, and then right before you get out, the military shows up and is like, oh hey, you must be crazy, and shoots you. I mean, I personally felt cheated. Had it been one of the patients who finished me off, I would have been much more okay with that. But nope, military popped several rounds of caps in your ass. Okay, yes, sure, Walrider had merged with Miles' body or whatever, but still it felt dumb, considering Walrider was never really a threat to you throughout the duration of the game to begin with. And at number 2 is Fallout 3. Regardless of what you've chosen, you die. Sacrifice yourself, you die. Don't, radiation will eventually kill you. You can't win when it comes to a nuclear apocalypse. It's a tough life. But by die, I mean you end up seeing this photo montage, and if you choose to sacrifice yourself, you get a montage that basically pats you on the back. And if you don't, you get a different montage that essentially calls you a coward, all implying that you've eventually died. What a fun time. And in at number 1 is Mass Effect 3. So no matter what you do, whatever hard choices you felt you made, whatever philosophical and existential crises you've encountered and dealt with throughout this whole bloody damn trilogy, doesn't matter. Why have a game that uses the basis of cause and effect based off of your consequences if those choices that you made actually have no weight? While there was a DLC introduced by developers BioWare to ease some of the pain this gave players, it's still pretty palpable. And at number 10 is Halo Reach. Starting off this list with a game that has the ultimate sacrifice in it. So you play as Noble Six, who at the conclusion of the game remains on the planet Reach fighting off the Covenant's forces, all for the ship Pillar of Autumn to escape and discover a Halo Ring world. The game tells you that your goal is to survive, but really it's just a suicide mission, to take down as many of your attackers as you can before biting the bullet. And the game really drives the whole you're dead point forward with a small cutscene after the credits. But you do get to see a time flash forward to the grassy plains with restored Reach, so that's nice at least. Up next, number 9 is Resistance 2. In Resistance 2 you play as Lieutenant Nathan Hale, who travels back to the US to battle Chimera, who are now hardcore invading both coasts of the country. He's a Sentinel, someone who was infected with the Chimeran virus, but fights for the good guys, and manages to keep it under control via application of inhibitors. But after the climax of the game goes down, Hale along with Corporal Joseph Capelli manage to escape the destruction of the Chimeran ships. But Capelli realizes that Hale has been fully possessed by the Chimeran virus, and Capelli does the only thing he can do, which is kill Hale by shooting him. Up next at 8 is Shadow of the Colossus. You play as Wander on a mission to defeat 16 Colossi in order to restore the life of a girl named Mono, who was sacrificed because it was believed she had a cursed destiny. After defeating the final Colossus, it becomes obvious that Wander has been corrupted, and then he's killed as he approaches Mono by Eamon's warriors. But hey, at least Mono wakes up. And at number 7 is LA Noire. Working your way up from patrol cop to a detective, Cole Phelps, a World War II vet, starts to rise in the ranks of the LAPD, and when he starts to threaten the ulterior motives of his partner in Vice, corrupt Detective Roy Earl, he's framed and used as a scapegoat. Disgraced, he's demoted to arson, but gets the chance to set things right and clear his name. Unfortunately, in the process, he ends up drowning when pursuing a perp, who used to be part of his former unit abroad. Next up at number 6 is Star Wars The Force Unleashed. In this one you play as Starkiller, aka Galen Marek, Darth Vader's apprentice who goes from villain to hero, growing stronger than his mentor and ultimately giving players the choice of being good or evil by the conclusion of the game. Now if you choose the dark side, you kill Vader, and then go after Emperor Palpatine, who immediately crushes and kills you. If you choose the light side, you fight as Palpatine and sacrifice yourself by opening up your body to the Force, then becoming a martyr that inspires the newly formed Rebel Alliance. I mean, if you're gonna die, being a martyr and helping the Rebel Alliance probably seems like the best choice to go with. Perhaps. And at number 5 is Mafia. Set in the Prohibition years in a fictional city called Lost Haven, you play Tommy Angelo, a taxi driver who starts working for the Solari family, and after disobeying orders at the end of the game, he flees, eventually brokering himself a deal with Detective Norman, which lands Solari in prison along with a bunch of others who were sentenced to death. Tommy is then sent to Empire Bay for his protection, and years later, he's assassinated by 2 hitmen on Solari's behalf. The fun part is you get to relive his death a second time, except from the perspective of his hitmen in the game's sequel, who turn out to be Mafia 2 protagonist Vito Scaletta and his friend Joe Barbera. And at number 4 is Assassin's Creed 3. The first 3 Assassin's Creed games have us following Desmond's journey using the Animus and playing as his ancestors, but at the end of the 3rd game, Desmond is faced with the decision of giving up his life in order to save the world. So he chooses to sacrifice himself since it will give humanity the opportunity to fight Juno rather than be annihilated. And at number 3 is Mass Effect 3. Here's an ending that many fans were outraged over, and rightfully so. After playing your way through the whole Mass Effect trilogy, trying to save the galaxy and whatnot, you and pretty much everybody else end up dying, and And yes, while a DLC was released to relieve some of this disdain and give Shepard the opportunity to actually survive, if you have a high enough EMS that is, still left a lot of people quite grumpy. Plus, it's only if you choose to destroy the Reapers that you end up having a chance at living, so. Next up at number 2 is The Walking Dead Season 1. This one's heartbreaking, and goes very much in tune with what we've come to expect from The Walking Dead, especially the comics. So you play the game as a man named Lee who ends up befriending a young girl named Clementine. After enduring plenty of hardships together, Lee eventually is bitten, and the game gives you the option of either telling Clementine to kill you or to leave you and let you become a walker, or do nothing, in which case Clementine will decide what to do based on your previous decisions in the game. The series continues in Season 2 with you playing as Clementine, who is just generally awesome. So at least there's a silver lining there. And finally at number 1 is Red Dead Redemption. I think we can all agree that the lead up to John Marston's death is not only wonderfully tragic, but cinematic as f. You spend the whole game trying to redeem your past sins, hence the title, and almost get the life that you've been working towards, living on your ranch with your family happily ever after. Except the government is a bunch of hypocrites and they come after you, resulting in one of the most epic shootouts in video game history. You do end up getting to seek out your revenge afterwards playing as John's son, but it's just not the same. He's just not John Marston.
In at number 10, Grand Theft Auto 4.
Gift from Dmitry Raskolov.
Man, do the developers at Rockstar Games really know how to box you into a corner. In the ending of Grand Theft Auto 4, they really do not give you a happy ending decision. You have two options to go with. One is exacting revenge, and the other is making a deal. If you go with making the deal, Nico's cousin Roman is shot dead by an attacker on his wedding day. And if you go with the revenge option, Nico's love interest Kate ends up being torn to bits in a hail of bullets from an assault rifle by a drive-by shooter. Both endings are abrupt from the once happy moment you shared in the church watching your cousin get married. It's a bold move by Rockstar as both endings result in a beloved character being killed quite unceremoniously. In at number 9, Portal. The first ending to Portal was a surprisingly happy one at that, but when the sequel began building, they retconned the first game and patched in a second, more dark ending. When Portal 2 begins, you awaken from your cryogenic sleep, and the AI Wheatley tells the protagonist Chell that 10,000 others were in the test chambers and they're now dead. Without that ending to the first game added, you would remain blissfully unaware of why these people died. All of those chambers were destroyed by Chell when she finished off the first game. It did take a second game for the people to realize just how dark the added ending was, but essentially though, you discover that you are responsible for killing 10,000 people. In at number 8, Halo 3.
A memorial to heroes fallen. They ennobled all of us, and they shall not be forgotten.
Speaking of genocide, Halo 3 certainly proved to become a dark ending for gamers. After the war between humans and the Covenant had slowed down, it looked as though Master Chief had done it. He had saved the Earth and stopped the aliens, something that would call for celebration, but not just yet. You then learned that while the war was going on, the Covenant had committed mass genocide amounting to 23 billion. So that makes things a little harder to celebrate when the people you'd celebrate with are essentially dust now. It was 5 years after that ending before Halo 4 was released, but until then, fans just had to wonder if the human race would ever be able to recover. Number 7, Conker's Bad Fur Day. At first glance, this seems to be a harmless video game about a profane squirrel who's trying to save his girlfriend, although the developers added in a really dark twist that rips your heart out. In the final minutes of the game ending, the screen freezes right as a xenomorph from the Alien series lunges at you. It offers a moment of the fourth wall breaking down where Conker asks the developers for some help. They give him a katana sword and he defeats the alien, but then he realizes after he's crowned king that his girlfriend is still dead. He asks the developers again for help, only this time to get no answer. It's the ultimate metaphor of a god existing but just doesn't really care about your every single need.
Oh no. Of all the people in the world that I don't like, I'm in a room full of them.
So the game just ends with Conker on his throne, drinking himself into depression.
It's true what they say. The grass is always greener. And you don't really know what it is you have until it's gone. gone.
Number 6, Half-Life 2 Episode 2. The Half-Life episodes were a great way for Valve to lay out the foundation to hype people up for a possible Half-Life 3. Although in the ending of Half-Life 2, it left fans crushed and depressed for over 5 years. It's an infuriating cliffhanger where the protagonist Gordon Freeman, along with his friends Alex and her father Eli, enter into a hangar to board a helicopter, finishing their escape. Just when things are looking up, a pair of advisors break in and kill Eli in front of Gordon and Alex. Before they're about to also kill Alex, Dog finally comes in to save the day, but it still leaves us with Alex holding her father's dead body. It's a depressing glimpse into the Half-Life universe that will always be remembered as one very dark video game ending.
Dad! Oh God! Dad! Dad, please! Dad!
Number 5, Shadow of the Colossus. Known as one of the greatest video games of all time, it sets gamers up for one of the most miserable plot twists in history. As a protagonist called Wander, you spend most of the ending trying to hunt down 16 things called Colossi, which are supposed to hold the key to rescuing your fallen-love Mono. Although, once you defeat the final one, it's revealed that the Colossi are actually holding back a demon named Dorman. The demon then possesses you and transforms your character into a baby with horns. However, Mono decides to take care of the baby, but it also means that Mono and Wander never truly get to be together at the ending of the game. Number 4, Red Dead Redemption. The Red Dead Redemption series has by far become one of the greatest storylines courtesy of Rockstar Games. The first game paid full homage to the Wild West, and the rogue character of John Marston managed to be quite likable, which made this ending sting even more. Marston comes out of the barn to a gang with guns pointed in his direction, and the game allows you to fire off a few shots, but before you know it, the bullets have ripped through Marston, taking him down in a bloody mess. Rockstar even manages to skip the whole famous last words cliche that would usually follow a scene as brutal as that one. Instead, they flip to his wife and son Jack standing over his father's body.
No. No.
In at number 3, Mass Effect 3. This is one of those games that the storyline never led you to believe it would be depressing, yet here we are. It's mostly because gamers were lied to by BioWare. They insisted that in Mass Effect 3, all of the decisions that you had made on your save file within the last 3 games would culminate into one big emotional ending. However, what it came down to was a choice of 3 colors, making all previous decisions entirely irrelevant. Number 2, Far Cry 3. Most people expected the Far Cry series to become a forgotten death with its awful stories. However, remarkably enough, Far Cry 3 managed to outdo it with an even crazier narrative. The ending was incredibly dark and probably not even safe for you to talk about at work. We can't even show you the video, it's that brutal. In the end, you terminate the remaining friends that you do have, and then mid-coitus, while in some strange ancient ritual, the woman you're having sex with stabs you in the chest. It's strange, it's brutal, and incredibly dark. Lastly, in our number 1 spot, Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. Metal Gear Solid managed to pull a fast one over on players with this shocking twist of events. Naked Snake, aka Big Boss, saves the day, but he's forced to kill his former mentor because, well, she switched from the US to the Soviets. Although what's revealed to us in the ending is that his mentor was actually a double agent who had been helping Snake the entire time.
A lesser woman would have been crushed by such a burden. The taint of disgrace will follow her to her grave.
None of that matters though, as his former mentor's name goes down in history as a traitor instead of a hero. The game leaves us with Snake saluting her unmarked grave as he sheds a tear and becomes one of the few people left who really know her truth.
Life's end. Isn't it beautiful? It's almost tragic. When life ends, it gives off a final lingering aroma. Light is but a farewell gift from the darkness to those on their way to die.